Nobody had ever seen a ship like it before. Not in this quadrant, not in any charted corner of the galaxy. It appeared without warning, rising from the dead silence of a wormhole that hadn't even been there 5 seconds earlier. The rift tore open space like paper, and from it came the warship, blacker than the void, shaped like a nightmare with jagged wings, and a body that shimmered with some kind of armor the Galactic Empire's sensors couldn't identify. On the bridge of the Imperial dreadnought Vornaxis, High Marshal Zarek clicked his mandibles nervously. The Empire's fleet had conquered planets just for the thrill of it. They'd vaporized moons to send a message. But even he, a seasoned killer from the Raxion hive, felt a slither of unease crawl down his spine. This wasn't just a warship. This was something else. "Scan it," Zarek barked. "Immediately." The sensor drones didn't even return. They just vanished. No data, no readings, not even a blip. The warship hovered like a predator that knew it was at the top of the food chain. Its hull rippled like liquid metal, and glowing crimson lines pulsed across its sides, beating in time with some deep internal energy source. No signal, no code, no identification. It just watched. And then it spoke, not through radio, not through the usual universal protocol. It injected its voice directly into every mind on every ship within 10,000 kilometers. "We warned you. You took what was ours. Now we take it back." The voice was human. Rough, gravelly, full of venom, ancient and angry. Zarek recoiled, his inner membrane twitching. "What in the galaxy is that thing?" growled Admiral Niesel, a crystalline being from the Thalos cluster. Even she looked spooked, her glowing body dimming at the edges. "It's speaking directly into our minds." "It's a violation of mental space," whispered a junior tactician. "That's illegal under the Interstellar Code." "This ship doesn't care about your codes," Zarek muttered. "That's a human vessel." There was silence on the command deck, and then a wave of fear hit. Humans had been declared extinct over a century ago, wiped out during the Siege of Sol. Their home system was obliterated, their colonies burned. The Empire had made sure of it, hadn't they? So what the hell was this? And then the human warship moved. It didn't fire lasers or plasma beams. It screamed, a sonic pulse that tore through shields like wet paper, making every crew member in the fleet vomit, scream, or collapse. Thousands of ships blinked out. No explosion, no debris, just gone, deleted. Panic spread like wildfire. "What kind of weapon is that?" Niesel cried, clutching her head. "It's not a weapon, it's a message," Zarek replied. His voice was barely a whisper now. "They're telling us we're not alone anymore." The warship launched no fighters. It didn't need to. It drifted through the Empire's fleet like a shadow, and every ship it passed either shut down completely or imploded in on itself like crushed tin. The Galactic Empire had never seen anything like it. This wasn't warfare, it was judgment. And behind the horror, the whispers began, from soldiers, from slaves, from rebel cells. "The humans are back." They didn't die, they evolved. No, they became monsters to survive. And out there, in the wreckage, the human warship turned slowly and disappeared back into the rift. But its warning echoed through every mind in the sector. "Next time, we bring the fleet." 2 days passed. 2 long, silent, blood-chilling days. The Imperial Command Hub on Virex 9 was in full lockdown. Hundreds of high-ranking officials from across the Galactic Empire had been pulled in for an emergency assembly. The atmosphere was nothing like usual. No pomp, no posturing. Just fear. Cold, honest fear. Zarek stood before the gathering, his eyes sunken, his voice flat. "We lost 17 dreadnoughts, 49 cruisers, nearly 80 support crafts, all without firing a single successful shot. There were no survivors on any of those ships, not one. A low murmur spread through the crowd. Some dismissed it, still clinging to denial. Others couldn't stop trembling. The Emperor's hologram flickered into view, his hulking form dwarfing the rest of the council. Emperor Kalsar was not a being easily shaken. He had personally executed planetary governors with his bare claws, but even his tone had a strange twitch to it now. "What do we know of the humans?" Zarek hesitated. "Very little. They were confirmed extinct after the siege of Sol. Our records show no surviving colonies. Their technology, while chaotic and unpredictable, never approached what we saw 2 days ago." "Then explain that ship," the Emperor growled. "We can't. Nothing in our archives comes close. We recovered no debris. Their energy signature is untraceable. It's like they returned from death with weapons forged in some hell we can't understand." Kalsar's eyes narrowed. "Then we prepare for hell." That same day, a secret recon probe was launched. It was cloaked in triple-phase shadow tech, designed to be undetectable even by fourth-dimensional entities. Its mission: go back to the edge of the rift where the warship appeared. Find answers. It never reported back. But the probe's final recording, just 3 seconds of scrambled video, leaked. The footage showed something the Empire refused to admit was possible. A fleet. Dozens of human warships, each different in shape and style, but with the same impossible aura. Silent, watching, waiting. Each ship bore a name etched in rough Terran script. Vengeance, Sol's Fury, Earth's Ghost, and one that made even the Emperor pause: the Children of No Mercy. The panic was no longer silent. The civilian sectors started to riot. News spread, fast and raw, carried through underground info channels and rebel frequencies. The Empire had lied. Humans were alive, and they weren't coming in peace. Resistance groups, long hunted, weakened, fragmented, started resurfacing. On planets like Draxin, Gale Toe, and Zarn 3, old flags were raised. Not of Earth, not of Sol, but something new. A black sun over blood-red stars, the symbol of vengeance. And among the terrified elite of the Empire, rumors spread like wildfire. They said the humans had lived in the black voids between galaxies, evolving, adapting, surviving like monsters in the dark. They said they didn't just want retribution. They wanted the galaxy to remember. And Zarek, alone in his quarters, kept replaying that voice. That horrible, human voice that had crawled into his skull and branded itself there. "We warned you. You took what was ours. Now we take it back." He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Because he'd been there during the siege of Sol. He had helped burn Earth. And now he was starting to believe that was the worst mistake the Empire had ever made. The sky above the prison moon of Cardus 5 was the color of ash. Down below, in cell block E19, the walls vibrated with distant explosions. The guards were gone, either dead or long fled. Prisoners stood around the flickering security lights, not celebrating, not rioting, just listening. Everyone had heard the same thing on the emergency frequency loop. "The Empire has been breached. The humans have returned." For Valen Roque, this was more than just news. It was prophecy fulfilled. He sat cross-legged in his cell, staring at the crude symbol he'd carved into the floor a decade ago. A crude Earth with burning wings. The others used to mock him for it, called him the last human loyalist, a delusional relic of a dead species. But now even the cynics were quiet. "Was it real?" someone asked from the cell across. "That ship? The thing that erased the fleet near Threnox?" "They say it screamed," said another, "and the sound alone killed 6,000 beings." "It wasn't just a ship," Valen finally spoke, rising to his feet. "It was a warning and a promise." They all turned to him now, those same men and creatures who once ridiculed him. What promise? That the age of cowards is over, that the Empire will pay. Valen was no ordinary prisoner. He'd once served in the Terran Shadow Corps, a Black Ops division the Empire tried to erase from history after the war. He'd been captured after the fall of Mars's last resistance outpost, tortured, forgotten, but not broken. He had always known the humans would return. He just never thought they'd return like this. A loud boom shook the prison. The main gate's blast door began to bend inward like paper. Screams echoed in the distance. The prison's AI flickered online, garbled and frantic. "Security breach! Breach! Unknown vessel! Imminent collapse! Flee!" Then it cut off. Total silence. For 3 heartbeats, the prisoners stared at one another. And then the blast door exploded inward. The smoke cleared to reveal a single figure. Tall, wrapped in dark exo-armor, the kind not seen since the old war. Red visor, black shoulder plates, the emblem of Earth, cracked down the middle, still visible on the chest. The figure said nothing. Just stepped inside, slow and calm, as if it had all the time in the galaxy. And Valen smiled. He knew that armor. "Kara," he whispered. The figure turned toward him slightly. The helmet peeled back, revealing a face Valen had memorized in another life. Pale, scarred, eyes like frost-bitten steel. "Been a while," she said, voice dry as a grave. "You're alive," he breathed. "They told me you died during the fall of Titan." "I did," she said, "but death doesn't mean much anymore." She tossed him a pulse rifle, an old Earth model, burn-scored but functional. "Suit up, you're coming with us." "Us?" She tilted her head toward the hole behind her. Shapes moved in the smoke. Humanoid, monstrous, armored, a squad of human specters. "We're everywhere now," she said, "and this galaxy's going to remember why it feared us." Around them, prisoners dropped to their knees. Not out of fear, out of something worse for the Empire. Hope. "Where are we going?" Valen asked. "To burn down the thing that tried to bury us," she said, "starting with the bastards who bombed Earth. You remember Zirek?" Valen's eyes narrowed. "Too well." "Good, because he's next." She turned, walking into the smoke again. Valen looked down once more at the carving on the floor. Earth with burning wings. Not a dream, not madness, prophecy. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and followed her into the darkness, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Because the galaxy had poked a sleeping dragon, and now the humans were awake. High Marshal Zirek didn't eat, didn't sleep. He barely even moved anymore. He sat alone in his fortified quarters aboard the flagship Dominion's Wrath, orbiting above the capital world of Virex Prime. His claws twitched occasionally, involuntarily. His usually proud wings had gone dull, pressed tight against his back like a sick creature hiding from predators. Outside his chamber's window, the might of the Empire glistened in formation. Warships, battlecruisers, planetary defense cannons. It should have comforted him. It didn't. He knew it wouldn't matter. The humans were back, and they were doing something far worse than fighting. They were making people remember. Across the galaxy, planets once loyal to the Empire were turning. Whole cities were rioting, broadcasting human propaganda like it was a religious awakening. A single phrase repeated across every hacked frequency, from mining colonies to academic hubs. We were broken, but we learned. Now we return. Not as victims, as nightmares. The worst part? No one could stop it. The humans weren't coming in fleets to occupy or destroy. They were sending in ghosts, elite strike teams, black ships, coordinated sabotage. Planetary governors were being found with their skulls crushed in their own bunkers. Empire-controlled news centers were exploding mid-broadcast. Entire outposts vanished without a trace. Zarek had seen the footage. That face, the woman with the pale skin and dead eyes, the one leading the squad on Cardus 5. She didn't wear insignia. She didn't speak much. She just left messages behind, scrawled in Terran script on blood-stained walls. This is for Earth. She was on every bounty list now. Codename, the Revenant, and she wasn't alone. The rebels were calling themselves the Black Sun Armada, a scattered fleet that didn't exist on any radar, made up of exiles, survivors, and something far worse. New humans, forged in deep space where physics bent and time twisted. The Empire's intelligence division insisted they were few in number. But Zarek knew better. He remembered what humans were like before the fall. Clever, stubborn, vicious when cornered. They never stopped adapting. You couldn't break them. Not truly. And the ones who'd survived the siege of Sol, they weren't just survivors. They were what survived hell. Suddenly, a sharp beep cut through the silence of his chamber. Incoming call. Priority override. He clicked to accept. A three-dimensional projection flickered into place. It was Emperor Khalsar. Zarek straightened immediately. Marshal Zarek, the Emperor said, voice like distant thunder. We've received a message, intercepted from an unsecured rebel channel. Zarek nodded grimly. Another threat? The Emperor shook his head slowly. Worse, a promise the audio played. It was rough, staticky, but unmistakably human. We don't want your surrender. We want your screams. You taught us extinction. Now we teach you revenge. Then the voice laughed, cold, hollow. No joy in it, just venom. Zarek, you burned Earth. We remember. We're coming for you. The audio cut. Zarek felt a tremor run through his bones. He had never told anyone he'd been part of the team that authorized the bombardment. His name was buried deep in classified logs. How had they known? They've breached our archives, Zarek whispered. This is personal. They want to dismantle the Empire piece by piece, Khalsar growled, and you are now their symbol of vengeance. I should step down, Zarek said suddenly. If I go into hiding... No, the Emperor interrupted. You will be bait. Zarek looked up, eyes wide. You will remain in command. We'll leak intel, let them come, and when they do, the trap will close. Zarek nodded stiffly. It was a plan. A desperate one. But it was something. The call ended. He stood slowly, walking towards the window. The stars blinked peacefully above, but he could feel the storm coming. In his chest, in the gravity of the air, it was like the galaxy had shifted. Behind him, the lights in the room flickered, just for a second. But he noticed. And somewhere, deep in the black space beyond radar and reach, Kara, the Revenant, watched her target from a hidden scout vessel. He's on the move, she muttered, just like we wanted. Valen nodded beside her. Ready for part 2? She didn't answer. Her eyes were already locked on the Dominion's wrath, and her finger was tightening on the activation switch. The Dominion's wrath began its slow orbit around Virex Prime, unaware that the ghost of Earth's fury was already watching from less than 1,000 kilometers away. Kara stood in the observation bay of the Black Sun Wraith, a vessel so deeply cloaked in stealth tech it didn't reflect light or gravity. It wasn't even visible on visual scanners. To the Empire, it didn't exist. But to Kara, and the few like her who had survived what the galaxy tried to forget, it was home. She studied the Imperial flagship, watching the shimmering blue shields ripple across its hull. Zarek's moved into Sector 3, Valen reported from behind her. Standard defense posture, but they've got fighters patrolling at 3-minute intervals, rotational pattern, and at least 2 carrier cruisers within strike range. Kara didn't turn. They're waiting for us. They want us to come, he said, stepping closer. This is the trap. I know. And we're still going? Kara's eyes narrowed. Of course we are. She turned, walking across the control platform toward the mission table, where the other 4 members of her team were reviewing layouts of the Dominion's wrath. They were all different, one part Terran, one part something else. Survivors who had spent too long in the void between galaxies, in abandoned science vessels, old mining colonies, and deep black places where even the laws of physics grew tired. Let's be clear, Kara said, voice firm. This isn't about killing Zirek. That's the easy part. Then what's the hard part? Asked Ral, a 4-armed soldier who'd once fought in Earth's final trench on Europa. Making sure everyone sees it. She tapped the display. We override their comms, hijack the broadcast stream. We show every system, every loyalist, every citizen, exactly what happens to Empire monsters. You want to execute him live? I want them to remember Earth. I want them to see that we didn't die. We evolved, and we haven't forgotten. No one argued, because they all wanted the same thing. Zirek wasn't just a target, he was a symbol. The one who had ordered the orbital bombardment that turned Earth's oceans into vapor and sent its cities tumbling into craters. He didn't just destroy their world, he laughed doing it. Kara still remembered the broadcast. Zirek on the screen, saluting the Empire's victory, standing beneath the burning image of Earth. She hadn't seen that image since. Not until she woke up floating in the ruins of Titan's escape facility, barely alive. A machine kept her breathing. A forgotten A. I reactivated during the collapse, repaired her piece by piece with stolen tech and alien scrap, and when she finally stood again, all that remained was vengeance. Now it was time. Suit up, she said. We breach in 30. Inside the Dominion's wrath, Zirek paced his private corridor, surrounded by 2 elite guards and a nervous young aide. Sweat glistened on the aide's temples despite the climate control. There are rumors, the aide whispered, about the Revenant, that she's already in this system. She's a shadow, Zirek spat. A ghost with good press. We've laid the perfect trap. She'll come, and we'll end this pathetic rebellion with one broadcast. But if she's evolved, like they say, then she bleeds like the rest. Zirek didn't notice the flicker in the lights. He didn't hear the low static crackling from the floor panels, and he certainly didn't hear the soft click from the vent above. But he noticed the explosion. It hit the corridor next to his, throwing him to the ground, blowing out oxygen seals. Fire, smoke, chaos. Lock the bulkheads, he roared, scrambling to his feet. His guards closed around him. Too late. Kara dropped from the ceiling like a shadow with form, her armor shifting, eyes glowing red. Her blade sliced through the first guard before he drew his weapon. Valen came in through the smoke, pulse rifle chattering. Zirek tried to flee. Kara grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. He stared at her, eyes wide, gills twitching. You, he rasped. You should be dead. She leaned in close, eyes locked on his. I was. She activated her comlink. Broadcast is live, Ral confirmed from the ship. Every screen in the system flickered. Every citizen, every soldier, every loyalist saw what came next. Kara turned to the camera. This is for Earth, and pulled the blade across Zirek's throat. The scream echoed across star systems. Millions watched in silence, on factory moons, on orbiting trade hubs, even deep inside the glass towers of the Empire's bureaucratic core. Every screen flickered with static, then locked onto a single brutal image. High Marshal Zarek, blood pouring from his throat, eyes frozen wide in disbelief, collapsing to the floor as Kara stood over him like a reaper from forgotten legends. She didn't flinch, didn't gloat. She simply stared into the camera as if daring the galaxy to look away. and then the feed cut to black. For a moment, there was silence, then chaos. In less than an hour, 3 Outer Rim colonies declared independence from the Empire. Soldiers began deserting their posts. Civilians poured into the streets, many holding makeshift banners bearing the mark of the Black Sun Armada. Even some mid-tier governors, long silent under the Emperor's rule, began secretly reaching out to rebel contacts, trying to find a way to switch sides before they were next. The fear had changed. It no longer belonged to the oppressed, now it belonged to the throne. Deep inside the Black Sun Wraith, the team regrouped, bloodied but alive. Kara sat alone in the ship's inner chamber, her armor half stripped, the dried blood of Zurek still staining the edges of her gloves. She stared at her own reflection in the darkened panel. She didn't look like a savior. She looked like something that had crawled out of a war long buried under rubble and lies. Valen entered quietly. He'd cleaned up, his pulse rifle slung over his back, a fresh scar along his temple. "You did it," he said softly. "Zurek's gone. The whole damn galaxy saw it." Kara didn't answer. He stepped closer, uncertain. "Isn't this what you wanted?" She finally looked up at him. Her voice was flat. "It's not over." "No," he admitted, "but it's the turning point." Kara stood slowly, the weight of her body heavy, like each movement hurt more than it should. "They'll come harder now. Khalsar won't take this lightly. We humiliated them." "That was the point." "No," she corrected. "The point was to warn them." He frowned. "Warn them? We've shown them what we're capable of, but they haven't seen our full strength yet." Her voice darkened. "We wanted them to know there's no place safe anymore. Not for war criminals. Not for tyrants." Valen hesitated, then nodded. "And what now?" Kara looked down at the blood on her gloves. "Now we make it personal for Khalsar." In the Imperial Palace on Virex Prime, the throne room shook with fury. Emperor Khalsar slammed his obsidian fist down on the command table, shattering it. Shards flew in every direction. The High Council stood frozen, none daring to speak. "She executed Zurek," the Emperor hissed, voice barely human anymore, "and broadcast it like a street show, in front of billions." "She's igniting rebellion in all sectors," muttered one aide. "Even the core is starting to murmur." "Silence!" Khalsar turned, his massive figure looming over them. His golden armor gleamed with rage. "They think this war's about revenge," he growled. "They think their fear makes them powerful. Let me show them what fear truly is." He turned to his warden general, a towering creature clad in red and steel. "Initiate Protocol Darklight." There was a long pause. Even the warden hesitated. "Sire, that protocol was sealed after— Unseal it." Khalsar's voice dropped to a growl that rumbled like thunder. "Bring the Doombringers out of stasis. They've slept long enough." The chamber dimmed, and the Emperor's face twisted into something ancient and cruel. "If the humans want to rise from the ashes, then let them burn again." Back aboard the Wraith, Kara felt the tremor before the ship's systems detected it. A spike in subspace distortion, then a signal. Faint, repeating. One she hadn't heard in decades. She froze. Valen looked at her. "What is it?" she whispered. "Doombringers." He blinked. "Impossible. They were outlawed after the Orion genocide." "They're bringing them back," she said. "The Empire's getting desperate." "What do we do?" Kara looked out into the void, where the stars trembled in anticipation. "We stop hiding," she said. And in that moment, the ghost of Earth stopped being a whisper. It became a war cry. In the cold, dead reach between galaxies, the Doombringers awoke. They didn't scream, didn't groan, didn't roar. They simply opened their eyes, dead white things, rimmed with circuitry and void steel, and the galaxy began to die a little more. The stasis chambers cracked open like eggs, spilling ancient fluid onto the black floors of Vault Theta, a forbidden facility buried inside a neutron star's magnetic core. Built in secret after the Siege of Sol, this place had one purpose: to hold the monsters the Empire had created when it feared the humans would win. And now those monsters walked again. Each Doombringer stood nearly 3 meters tall, draped in armor composed of star-forged alloy and infused with psionic dampeners so they couldn't feel pity, fear, or hesitation. Inside each one was what remained of a former warrior. Alien, human, synthetic? It didn't matter. Once selected, their minds were broken and reprogrammed, turned into pure instruments of destruction. The Empire hadn't used them in decades for a reason. They didn't just kill. They erased. And Kalzar had just ordered a dozen of them deployed across rebel systems. Kara stared at the new intelligence reports with a clenched jaw. Images from the colony world of Jera 9 played on the screen. Grainy at first, then sharp. Black shapes dropping from the sky like armored meteors, each one landing silently before unleashing annihilation. The footage didn't show a firefight. It showed a purge. Whole towns gone. No screams, no bodies, just charred ground and whispers of something that moved too fast for sensors to track. Valen spoke behind her, his voice shaking slightly. "This is what they've been hiding all these years." "They were saving them for us," Kara replied coldly. "Insurance, just in case we ever came back." Rael stepped into the room, red eyes flaring. 3 colonies hit in 48 hours, minimal resistance. They're targeting any system that raised our flag. "They're trying to cut out the infection," Valen muttered. "No," Kara said, straightening. "They're trying to break the myth. Destroy the hope we gave people when we killed Zarek. This is psychological, a counter-story." Raal leaned over the map display. "We need to strike back. Show them we're not afraid of their monsters." "We don't fight these things head-on," Kara said. "Not yet." Valen frowned. "So what then?" She brought up an older file. It showed diagrams of Vault Theta, internal schematics, energy logs, stasis chamber records. "We go to the source," she said. "We shut the vault down, destroy the birthing chambers, cut the leash before they can release more." Silence followed her words. "You want to break into a vault inside a neutron star?" Rael asked flatly. "That's suicide." "No," Kara said, eyes darkening. "It's war." 3 days later, the Wraith dropped out of slipspace on the edge of the magnetic shell surrounding Vault Theta. The system was dead. No suns, no planets, just radiation and the heavy hum of electromagnetic death. No ships dared come here. Not even scavengers. But the Wraith wasn't a normal ship. They coasted in on silent power, shields folded flat against the hull, using the star's gravity and magnetic field to slingshot toward the vault's docking spine. Inside the ship, Kara checked her armor for the 5th time. The plan was insane, she knew, but it had to be done. I-Core active," Rael reported. "We'll have only 7 minutes inside before the radiation fries our stealth mod." "More than enough," Kara replied. They launched. The boarding hooks caught on the outer ring of Vault Theta, digging into ancient alloy. The hull peeled open under Rael's plasma cutter, and the team slipped inside. Everything was dark, silent, like the place itself was asleep and dreaming of slaughter. They moved fast, sliding through corridors lined with stasis tubes and heavy vault doors. Every panel they passed whispered the same word: unstable. As they neared the core chamber, Valen paused beside a sealed tube. His eyes widened. Inside floated something human, or what was left of it. A body stripped of hair, with eyes replaced by chrome lenses, limbs fused with weaponry, chest open to reveal a pulsing core. He stepped back. "They were using our own," he whispered. "Humans," Kara's voice cracked. "They turned us into weapons, even after we died." Ral slammed the charge onto the main console. "You want to give them a message?" he growled. "Let's burn this nightmare down." Kara nodded, her voice low. "Light it up." The explosion tore through Vault Theta like a cleansing fire. No more Doombringers, no more Vault. And across the galaxy, every rebel world cheered. Because the humans hadn't just survived the monsters. They'd killed them at the roots. The galaxy trembled. News of the Vault, Theta destruction rippled outward like a shockwave, bouncing off comms relays and smuggler frequencies, amplified by underground networks and rebel broadcasters. Every corner of the Empire, every system, every planet, every throne room and slum heard the same phrase within a day. The monsters are dead, the Vault is gone, Earth remembers. Kara didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. The fire spoke for her. On Virex Prime, Emperor Kalsar stood before a fractured war map in the Imperial War Chamber, surrounded by silence. None of his advisors dared speak. He could feel it, the shifting tide. His grip, once absolute, now slipped like sand through fingers. Entire battalions defected overnight. Entire sectors went dark, not from damage, but from defiance. They weren't afraid anymore. They were angry, and worse, they had hope. "She was supposed to be dead," he muttered, barely audible. "Her species extinct. I watched Earth burn." A low voice answered from the shadows behind him. The Warden General, his last remaining loyal enforcer, a thing of metal and rage. "You underestimated what pain makes of a people." Kalsar turned sharply. "Then perhaps it's time I remind them what true power looks like." He reached for the console embedded in his throne. A final measure. A code buried beneath layers of protocols and bloodlocks. Something built in secret after the siege of Sol, Operation Eclipse, a system-cleansing weapon. Something meant to wipe entire quadrants. But as his hand hovered above the activation pad, the lights died, the walls flickered, and every screen in the war chamber flashed with a single symbol, a black sun over burning stars. "Hello, Kalsar," came the voice. "You wanted to bury Earth, but all you did was plant a seed." Kalsar's hands curled into fists. "How did they breach our systems?" But he already knew. This wasn't just warfare anymore. It was vengeance wearing 1,000 faces. On board the Black Sun Wraith, drifting silently above a newly liberated colony world, Kara stood on the bridge watching the stars realign. Her team behind her, wounded, weary, but alive. Around them, smaller rebel ships blinked in and out of formation, messengers of a new era. They had burned the Vault. They had ended the Doombringers. And now, for the first time since the fall of Earth, they were not just fighting back. They were winning. Valen stepped beside her, looking out through the viewport. "We've got transmissions from over 100 systems. Civil uprisings, desertions, Empire stations abandoning their posts." Kara didn't smile. She couldn't. Not yet. "There's still Kalsar," she said, "and the core systems are locked behind fleets. He won't go quietly." "He's afraid." "Good." She turned to the crew. Rael was patching up his shoulder. Sarah, their comms engineer, had finally removed her helmet, her eyes bloodshot but defiant. Even the new recruits, young, broken things they'd picked up along the way, stood taller now. "We've come from nothing," Kara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper but reaching every ear in the room. "From the rubble, from exile, from the edge of space where the Empire tossed us like trash." She looked around at the faces watching her. They thought they erased us. But we were learning, adapting, becoming something they could never understand. Kara clenched her fists. They called us extinct. She pointed toward the star map showing Kal-Zar's palace. Let's show them what extinction really looks like. 1 week later, the Black Sun Armada fell like judgment. No warnings, no declarations, just fire. Kara led the charge, her ship cutting through the last of the Empire's remaining defense grid like a blade through mist. Fighter squadrons with patched-together hulls and stolen weapons, piloted by former slaves, deserters, and orphans, pushed through the heart of Virex Prime's airspace. The palace fell in hours. Kal-Zar made it to the throne room. He died there, not by blade, not by bullet, but by fear. Alone, surrounded, watching the humans rise from the ashes he thought he'd created. Kara didn't gloat. She simply placed a flag in the center of his throne. The old Earth symbol, its continent scorched, its stars burning black. They didn't rebuild the Empire. They let it rot. Because what came next wouldn't be ruled by thrones or chains. It would be built by the broken, the survivors, the ghosts who refused to fade. And in the end, the galaxy did remember Earth. Not as the planet that died, but as the name whispered before every tyrant fell. Earth remembers. Earth returns. Earth wins. The first time Earth heard the name Zorith Dominion, it came as a whisper through a broken satellite transmission. Half garbled static, half terrified plea. No one really knew what it meant. Not yet. But something in that dying voice, broadcast across a wide-range emergency frequency, didn't sound like any language we spoke. And still, somehow, it made the hairs on every neck stand up. For years, the governments of Earth dismissed it as a hoax, or maybe just a lost deep space probe malfunctioning. But in secret, the military started watching the stars. Then came the Velnari Archive. A drifting object, smooth as obsidian, hollow like an urn, crashed through the exosphere and landed in the Nevada desert. It didn't explode. It hummed. Inside were images, millions of them. Whole species, planets, civilizations rising and falling in a cycle that always ended the same way. Fire, then silence. All of it, always overseen by the same black insignia burned into every last scene. 3 downward-pointing triangles, encircled by stars. It was genocide, and we weren't just spectators. We were next. By the time the United Earth Assembly declassified the archive, it was already too late. Probes vanished. Orbitals blinked out. Every deep space comm went dead in one synchronized silence, like the whole universe held its breath. Then the first ships came. They didn't announce themselves. No theatrics, no diplomacy, just raw efficiency, like exterminators. They took the moon first, not in battle, just in presence. Their ships hovered like quiet tombstones above the lunar surface. Then they began to extract. Not resources, people, moon miners, scientists, orbital engineers. They were taken in groups, no remains, no bodies, just empty bunkers, dead transmitters, and the same symbol left scorched into steel walls. Some fought back, small militias, rogue defense units. None returned. But Earth still didn't act. Fear became policy. Presidents made statements about peace, resilience, patience. They begged for time. Meanwhile, the Zorith Dominion kept watching, testing, measuring. And that's when we met Marin Vale. She wasn't a general, not a president. She was a failed astronaut, discharged after a failed Mars mission left half her team buried in dust. She'd spent the last 7 years scraping metal in underground tech pits for cash. She lived off expired ration packs and slept in a hangar behind an old scrapyard near Houston. But she was the first one to shoot one of them down. Not a full Zorith ship. A scout drone, about the size of a shuttle, moving low through Texas skies. No one else even saw it, but Marin had rigged an EMP cannon out of stolen parts and rusted Martian alloys. She fired it from the back of a pickup truck. It crashed in a fiery ball that lit up half the county, and suddenly, Earth remembered how to fight. Within hours, underground resistance forums lit up. Engineers, hackers, ex-soldiers, and outcasts started piecing together what little they knew. The mainstream government still wouldn't move, too afraid. But the people were done watching. That's when the Zorith made their first real move. They didn't attack a base or city. They hit Lagos, no warning, no demand. Just a heat pulse so strong it turned concrete into glass. Half the city went dark. 2 million people gone in less than 7 minutes. And the galaxy, the wider cosmos? They watched. There were other species. That was the most horrifying part. Dozens, hundreds. Some lived in glittering space havens. Others drifted in forgotten ruin. They all knew the Zorith. Some had been spared. Others had bowed. But not one of them moved when Lagos burned. That was the cycle. Observe. Survive. Submit. But Marin Vale didn't do any of those things. She stood in front of the smoking crater that used to be a city and looked up. She was live-streamed. Pirate signal, black market satellites, underground networks. And she said 5 words that rewrote the galaxy. We will not die quiet. The stream went viral in minutes, not just across Earth, but beyond. What few knew was that the Velnari archive wasn't just a warning, it was a signal, a tracker. Every time someone accessed it, fragments of that signal pulsed into subspace like a flare. The Zorith had expected fear. They had expected silence. They hadn't expected Marin Vale. Her face, smudged with soot and blood, broadcast through hacked orbital dishes and redirected probes. Her voice, ragged and furious, broke through jammers and alien static. Resistance cells, long dormant, blinked to life like old stars reigniting. Someone had finally said it. Not the diplomats, not the generals. A woman with nothing left had just declared war. But war didn't come easy. By the end of that week, the Zorith retaliated. They targeted 3 more cities, Seoul, Buenos Aires, and Prague. They didn't even fire weapons. Instead, they used gravitational field disruptors, collapsing buildings inward like they were made of paper. And in each crater they left the same symbol, burned into the bones of the earth. Still, Marin didn't stop. She gathered others like her, exiles, criminals, broken men and women who'd been tossed aside by a world too scared to act. They called themselves the Shatterborn, a name stolen from a children's myth about a star that exploded but refused to die. Their headquarters? A half-buried research facility in the Mojave, once owned by a forgotten tech company that tried to mine dark energy. They powered it up with what little solar panels remained, and stripped old satellites for data. Marin didn't care about diplomacy or permission. She wanted answers. The key came from a man named Tarek Jin, a xenolinguist who'd been dismissed from the UN Space Sciences Council after claiming alien contact during a blackout in Antarctica. No one had believed him. Until now. Tarek decoded the archive further. What he found wasn't just footage of destruction. It was a manual, a process. The Zorith didn't destroy planets out of rage or sport. It was a harvest, a galactic cycle. Every few centuries, the Dominion culled species nearing Phase 3 emergence, the point where they could rival Zorith technology. Not out of fear, but control. They didn't want competition. They wanted the illusion of peace maintained by absolute dominance. But humans? We weren't ready for Phase 3. Not officially. We had almost gotten there. But Earth, divided and distracted, never crossed the line. The Zorith had come early, They weren't culling a threat, they were killing potential. That was their mistake. Because Marin understood one thing the Dominion didn't. Humans don't need to be ready to fight. They just need a reason. The Shatterborn began sabotaging Zorith drones, small surgical strikes, hijacked a satellite in orbit and repurposed it to broadcast encrypted blueprints of alien tech back to Earth. Dozens of rebel groups emerged. In Nairobi, a mechanic used those blueprints to turn a garbage truck into a mobile EMP launcher. In Berlin, kids hacked into Dominion frequencies using old VR headsets, and then came the first kill. A Zorith Commander-class enforcer ship went down over the Atlantic just off the coast of Senegal. The blast came from deep below. Some claimed it was a repurposed nuclear sub. Others whispered that it was something older, a secret weapon buried during the Cold War. Whatever it was, the ship didn't just fall. It screamed as it broke apart, like metal mourning its own death. And the galaxy felt it. On distant colonies and other systems, long-silenced civilizations blinked to attention. The Targu in the Perseus Rift sent encoded vibrations into dark space. The Avira, long thought extinct, began transmitting from inside a black hole. And far beyond even them, the Krenosh, a race who hadn't moved in 3,000 years, whispered 3 words across the star lanes. The cycle cracks. But the Dominion didn't stay passive for long. In orbit, they deployed the Silence Engine, a black obelisk, larger than a city, positioned just outside Earth's magnetosphere. It wasn't a weapon, not in the conventional sense. It pulsed with a frequency that began shutting down our thoughts, causing seizures, blackouts, memory loss. It made people forget how to resist. Within days, entire populations began falling into catatonic states. Cities turned into graveyards of the still living. Whole nations went dark. But Marin Vale, already marked by cosmic radiation from her Mars mission, was immune. And maybe that was luck. Or maybe something else. Because inside her head, something had started to whisper back. Not human. Not Dominion. Older. Something buried deep in the archive, waiting for someone brave or broken enough to hear it. The voice in Marin's head didn't speak like we do. It wasn't words, not at first. It was more like memory, emotion, instinct. The moment the Silence Engine activated, most of Earth's population dropped to their knees, minds fraying like threadbare cloth. But Marin stood under that oppressive, skull-humming sky, still breathing, still burning with clarity. And inside her mind, something opened. She saw a world, not Earth, not any planet known to humans. It was glass and storms and twin suns burning purple in a sea-green sky. A species knelt beneath an obsidian tower, the same shape as the Zorith's Silence Engine, but cracked, ruined. Their minds had shattered under its weight. And yet, one of them had stood, bleeding, screaming, and before that ancient tower collapsed, they sent something into the void, a seed of thought, a scream carved in code. That scream had been waiting. Until now. Marin collapsed. Not unconscious, but overwhelmed. Tariq Jin found her an hour later in the desert, curled under the shadow of a broken wind turbine, shaking. She didn't speak for another 12 hours. And when she did, her voice wasn't quite hers anymore. "They didn't build it," she said. Tariq blinked. "What?" "The Zorith. The Silence Engine. It's not theirs. They just found it and copied it. And they don't understand it, not completely." Tariq leaned in, a cold sweat crawling down his neck. "Then who did?" Marin looked up at him. "Something older than memory, and it's still alive. They called it the First Mind, or rather, that's what the emotion translated to. A force born at the beginning of sentient thought across the universe. Not a god, not a monster, just a witness. And it hated the Zorith, because they weren't keepers of order. They were leeches. They took the tools of the ancients and wielded them like children with knives, slicing the future into pieces before it could form. But the first mind couldn't act directly anymore. It had fractured, scattered through time, buried in echoes and relics. Marin was one of the echoes now, and with her came knowledge, not full blueprints, not immediate power, but fragments. The Shatterborn built a device, a resonant cage based on Marin's visions. When activated, it blocked the silence engine's influence within a 10-mile radius. It was clunky, took 15 car batteries to power it, but it worked. They tested it in Detroit, now a ghost city of the catatonically silent. When the cage activated, people woke, coughing, sobbing, screaming. Many had been trapped in their own minds for days. Some remembered nothing. Others remembered everything, including the faint whisper in their dreams, calling them to rise. But the Zorith noticed, and they descended. Sleek, obsidian troopships landed in a spiral pattern around the city, black smoke hissing from their hulls. They moved in perfect formation, drones and enforcers sweeping the streets with laser precision. They didn't speak. The Dominion never did. They just took. And Marin had had enough. With less than 300 Shatterborn fighters, a hacked drone army made of repurposed delivery bots, and a handful of stolen Zorith weapons, she launched the first counterstrike of the human rebellion. It wasn't clean. It wasn't elegant. But it was furious. Molotovs made from hydrogen tanks, EMPs in microwave ovens, snipers hiding in abandoned skyscrapers. And at the heart of it, Marin carried something new, something given to her by the echo of that ancient civilization. A shard of void light. When she activated it, reality twisted. The nearest Zorith enforcers turned to salt. A cruiser above them crashed into its sister ship, as if magnetized by gravity gone wrong. The sky rippled, and the silence engine blinked, not shut off, but confused. It had never encountered resistance like this. It couldn't process defiance. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it was over, Detroit was rubble, but it was human again. And the news spread. The resonant cage plans were released into the underground web. Cells around the globe began building their own. People woke up. The slumber broke. And across the galaxy, something ancient stirred in its slumber. The Dominion called for reinforcements. The First Mind whispered its warning, and Marin Vale, battered and bloodied, stood atop a ruined tower with a rifle slung over one shoulder and ash in her teeth. "We are not your children," she spat at the sky. "We are your reckoning." By the time the Dominion's reinforcements arrived, humanity had already changed. In just under a month, cities that once knelt under the silence engine began building their defenses. Not from governments, not from world leaders, but from the people. The official world powers still clung to their polished speeches and closed-door treaties, hoping the Zorith would negotiate, even as their skies darkened and oceans boiled. But the rest of Earth had seen Marin Vale in Detroit. They had seen her standing on the wreckage of an enforcer-class war machine with nothing but fury and a strange, burning shard in her palm. She wasn't just a woman anymore. She was a signal. And signals spread. The Shatterborn were no longer a handful of rebels. Their numbers exploded. Pilots, mechanics, hackers, ex-felons, medics, anyone who still remembered how to think for themselves, anyone who still believed Earth didn't need permission to survive. They established rogue territories, dark zones, places where the silence engine's influence couldn't penetrate because of hundreds of resonant cages built from salvaged appliances and alien junk. They weren't pretty, they weren't stable, but they worked. And in those zones, something new happened. Humanity started adapting. Fast. Tariq Jin and his crew at Mojave Base began translating more fragments from Marin's visions. They called them memory bursts, crashes of alien instinct that gave strange insights. One burst showed them how to manipulate magnetic shielding in a way that bent Zorith weapons fire. Another revealed the principles of sound-based cloaking, turning vibrations into invisibility. It was as if evolution had cracked open and decided to sprint. But the Dominion wasn't sitting still either. They deployed the Reclaimers. Not machines, not drones. These were organic, twisted biomechanical things shaped like humans, but stretched, modified, created from the harvested remains of conquered species. One looked eerily like a Martian colonist from a failed Russian expedition. Another wore the skullplate of a Targu noble long thought extinct. These things didn't speak. They screamed, a psychic wail that shattered eardrums and ruptured minds. Their mission? Eradicate resistance. Not just kill, but erase. Marin faced her first reclaimer in the ruins of Jakarta. She'd come to deliver a shard of void light to a rebel cell, only to find the entire city overrun. The reclaimers moved like smoke and thunder, crushing tanks, ripping through steel, immune to most human weaponry. But they weren't immune to her. The void light shard pulsed as she approached, humming like it remembered them. The reclaimer turned its many-eyed face toward her. For a second, everything froze. Humans, drones, even the sky. Then the air collapsed inward, the shard activated. Light bled out in tendrils, curling into the reclaimer like knives of memory. It convulsed, twitched, began to unravel, not explode, unmake. Its skin peeled into static, its limbs folded into code. It screamed, not in rage, but in recognition, as if it knew her. When the thing vanished, nothing was left behind but dust and a small silver coin with the mark of the old Avira civilization. Marin fell to her knees, not out of exhaustion, but because her brain was bleeding. The shard had taken more than energy. It had taken memory. She couldn't remember her father's face. She couldn't remember her favorite song. She looked up at Tariq and asked, "Was I ever on Mars?" And that was the cost. Every time she used the shard, it gave humanity a weapon and took a piece of her soul. But she kept fighting, because somewhere in the whispers, something had changed. The first mind was no longer just watching. It was awakening. It began to reach out to others, across the dark zones, across Earth. Not many, not enough, but some. Children, mostly. Those with open minds and broken pasts. One of them, a blind girl in Morocco, began drawing symbols she couldn't see. They matched Marin's visions exactly. Another, a boy who hadn't spoken since his parents died in the Lagos burn, started chanting coordinates to a star system long thought dead. The first mind wasn't just hiding. It was choosing. And the Zorith knew it. They issued their first direct transmission to Earth, intercepted by rebel satellites. One sentence. Return the fracture or be undone. No voice, just pressure. A sensation of dread thick enough to bleed. The fracture. They meant Marin. She wasn't just a resistance leader now. She was the glitch in their control system. And glitches? Glitches don't stay still. They came for her at night. No warning, no ripple in the sky, no buildup of heat. 1 second, Marin Vale stood in the underground war room beneath Mojave Base, going over encoded schematics of a potential orbital strike system built from scrap satellites, and the next, the ceiling caved in with a sound like a god snapping its fingers. They didn't send ships this time, or drones, or reclaimers. They sent a collector. It didn't look like anything human. Towering, thin, almost liquid in the way it moved. It had no face, just a mask made of shifting plates, constantly rearranging to reflect whoever looked at it. When Marin stared at it, it wore her own face, broken, scared, young. She didn't run. She stepped forward. All the alarms screamed. Tariq Jinn was shouting something behind her, voice cracking. The Shatterborn guards pulled rifles, but none of it mattered. Because Marin wasn't made of fear anymore. She was a fracture, and fractures break more than they bend. The Collector didn't speak, but its intentions hit her like thunder in her chest. It had come to retrieve what didn't belong. The shard, the voice, her. But something was different now. The First Mind wasn't just watching her anymore. It was with her. She could feel it in her bloodstream, in her memories, in the ghosts of her thoughts. As the Collector reached out, Marin stepped closer, slowly pulling the void shard from the pouch strapped across her back. "You want this?" she whispered. And then she smiled. "Then bleed for it." She drove the shard into the Collector's chest, not with strength, but with purpose. The moment it touched the thing's core, the world around them fractured. Light split, time bent sideways. The Collector screamed, not aloud, but inside everybody's heads, like a million echoes of someone you loved dying all at once. It didn't die, it collapsed, pulled inward by the shard like it had never existed. The air boiled, the concrete cracked, and Marin vanished with it, gone. For 3 days, Earth went silent. No Marine, no Shatterborn transmissions, no sign of the Mojave base, just a crater where it had once stood. Some thought she had died. Others claimed she'd ascended. The world mourned. And then, on the 4th night, every unregistered satellite across the planet activated at once. Screens flickered to life, old televisions, dead monitors, even radios and vending machines. Marin's face appeared. She looked older, pale, eyes like dying stars, but she was smiling. "I'm not gone," she said. "I just went somewhere they didn't want me to see." Behind her, the feed glitched. Shapes flickered. Maps, coordinates, images of alien tombs, shattered moons, cities folded inside black holes. Then symbols, hundreds of them, raining across the feed like alien snowfall. Tariq Jinn, watching from a safe zone bunker in eastern Siberia, gasped aloud. "They're resistance worlds," he said. "Old ones, places the Dominion failed to wipe out." Marin nodded through the screen, as if hearing him across the world. "The cycle wasn't perfect," she said. "They missed things. Survivors, ghosts, seeds." Then her voice changed, deeper, wiser, less alone. "They thought they could end us before we bloomed, but they forgot. Some flowers grow in ash." And then the screen cut. In her absence, something extraordinary happened. All across Earth, people began to wake up before their resonant cages activated. Whole cities, like New Delhi, Havana, and Damascus, woke with no resistance at all. The silence engine faltered, its field destabilized. Whatever Marin had done when she pierced the Collector, it had damaged the Dominion's control in ways they couldn't fix. But not everyone took it as good news. The unified Terran Authority, what remained of Earth's original governments, called her a threat. They branded the Shatterborn a terrorist faction, claimed Marin had triggered irreversible cosmic contamination. They issued orders to detain any Shatterborn operative on site. But it didn't matter. By then, the Shatterborn were no longer a faction. They were a movement, a wildfire, a memory that could no longer be erased. And out beyond Saturn, deep in the Oort cloud, the Zorith began building something. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a mirror, a massive interdimensional array capable of folding time itself to reach backward and unmake Marin Vale before she ever touched the void. They were scared. Truly, finally scared, because they understood what had been born. And the galaxy? The galaxy had started watching again. Not in pity, not in silence, but in hope. They called it Project Reset. The Zorith Mirror Array, stationed just beyond Neptune's orbit, wasn't meant to kill Marin Vale. It was meant to erase her before she became her. To reach back and fracture her history so that the Void Shard never found her hand, the First Mind never whispered to her, and the rebellion never burned. It was elegant, horrifying, and something only the Dominion could construct without shame. But they underestimated humanity again. Because while they prepared to rewrite the past, humanity was rewriting the present. Marin had returned, not to Earth, but to Exis 4, one of the lost resistance worlds revealed in the satellite broadcast. Orbiting a collapsed star, Exis 4 was home to ruins so old they whispered even when silent. She wasn't alone, either. The First Mind had left others there. Remnants. Beings whose consciousness had been fractured by the original wave of silence engines thousands of years ago. They weren't alive in any biological sense. They were stored, preserved in crystalline memory pillars, barely clinging to sentience. When Marin touched one of them, her blood screamed and her brain split. But she saw everything. The original rise of the Zorith, the first culling, the desperate pact made by 100 civilizations to embed their legacy into the deep subconscious code of the universe. A psychic failsafe. And more importantly, the blueprint, not a weapon, a seed, a set of instructions on how to rebuild a soul after silence. Marin sent the data burst to Earth using frequencies not used since the birth of the stars. Tarek Jin, holed up in a resistance bunker in Norway, decoded it in 5 sleepless days. His skin peeled from radiation burns. His mind began to fracture. But what he found changed the war overnight. Neurotemporal resonance. The human brain, under the right pressure and aligned with void light, could interfere with Dominion time mirrors, not destroy them, corrupt them, shift them just enough to make history stutter instead of bend. It meant one thing. If they could build enough amplifiers on Earth and synchronize them with Marin on Axis 4, they could stop Project Reset. But there was a cost. The process would burn the minds of everyone linked to the signal. A psychic firewall created by human will alone. Once initiated, those connected would die. Not physically, but mentally. Gone. A living death. No return. And yet, tens of thousands volunteered. They called them the Remembered. Doctors, coders, farmers, runaways, veterans, children. Their memories uploaded into crystalline vaults, to be preserved even after their minds were lost. Their last thoughts synced into a living net of resistance consciousness. Marin activated the first signal node on Axis 4, using a construct of her own blood and void light. Earth followed. 15 resonance towers built by scavenged tech and shattered faith erupted to life across the planet. In the ruins of Moscow, the flooded streets of Manila, the overgrown shadows of what used to be Boston. The final node was set to go live in Nairobi, where the first reclaimer had fallen. The Dominion launched every remaining enforcer unit toward Earth. The mirror array began to glow, and then something happened. As Marin synced her pulse with the array, she felt something new inside the First Mind, something deeper than even memory. It was pain, not pain like a wound, pain like mourning, because the First Mind hadn't just witnessed extinction, it had survived it, alone. Billions of voices reduced to a single scream stretched over time, and in Marin's soul, it had found a chance to scream back. "You are not my weapon," it whispered inside her bones. "You are my echo." The last tower in Nairobi went live at 0342 UTC. Across space, the Zorith mirror activated. A wave of blue-gold light surged from its core, spiraling backward across time, searching for Marin's timeline to sever, and hit the firewall. The remembered activated in unison, and Earth's sky turned black, not with smoke or ash, but with memory. Faces, names, lives, love, rage. A psychic scream so loud the stars bent to listen, and the mirror array cracked, not physically, existentially. The past stuttered. The present held. Marin Vale didn't vanish. She solidified. And on the Dominion command ship orbiting Titan, a Zorith warden dropped its command staff and whispered, out loud, for the first time in centuries, they anchored themselves with will, and worse, they cannot be undone. The mirror array shattered in silence. Not with a boom, not with fire, but with the sound of nothing happening. A terrifying stillness where inevitability used to live. The Zorith watched in disbelief as their most precise weapon, their answer to history itself, folded into a knot of useless memory. It hadn't just failed. It had been denied. Earth hadn't just blocked the reset. Humanity had rewritten the rules. But there was a price. Across the planet, tens of thousands of minds, the remembered, went dark. Bodies still breathing, eyes still blinking. But no one home. They sat or collapsed wherever they were when the signal passed through them. Some died on their feet, some smiled, some cried just before the light left their gaze. Each had given everything, but not all were lost. Because the crystalline vaults, the mind cores built beneath the rebel cities, glowed, not with sorrow, but with presence. The remembered weren't gone. They had become part of something new. Tarek Jin was the first to notice it. He stood in the resonance control bunker in Norway, staring at the Mind Vault interface. It had no AI, no power, and yet the screen began to flicker. We are here. He fell to his knees, weeping. They're still with us. And across the galaxy, species once silenced by fear began to speak again. On the scorched remains of Nari Prime, the dormant volcanic cities of the Gex lit up with blue fire. On the ruined gas giant Zalarian, old Krenash transmitters, long thought corroded, broadcast a single symbol into space, a human hand raised. The cycle had broken, but the Dominion hadn't. Not yet. On Titan's orbiting command platform, Supreme Arbiter Zor, over 900 years old, armored in void steel, bloodless, issued the only command they had left. Send the Sunbreaker. It was a myth, a weapon of legend, a failsafe built for one purpose, to crack a planet's core and scatter its remains across its star system. It had only been used once, 1,000 years ago, when the Avira homeworld dared resist. Now it was Earth's turn. The Sunbreaker emerged from a folded rift in the void, a titanic structure bristling with heat core siphons and energy lances. It made the moon look like a pebble. It moved into position slowly, deliberately, because the Dominion wanted humanity to see it coming. They wanted fear to return. But Earth didn't flinch. The Shatterborn had already begun evacuating civilians into underground networks. Orbital defense grids, once hacked together messes of rusted satellites and junked probes, now pulsed with first mind resonators. Marin's stolen shard had been replicated twice, enough to create 2 more void cores, and each had been planted in orbital spears aimed directly at the incoming threat. But they weren't enough. Marin knew it. The Sunbreaker's core was unlike anything she'd ever seen in her visions. It didn't belong to the Dominion. It wasn't Zorith technology. It was older, repurposed from a dying star, perhaps gifted by something even the Dominion feared. The kind of tech that ends eras. And then the First Mind whispered to her again. There is one way. She knew before it finished. The shard inside her, the original fracture, could detonate. If synced with the other 2, the resulting pulse could overload the Sunbreaker and cause a feedback explosion through its siphon core. But it meant death. Real death. Not disappearance, not echo. No returning to the vault. No preservation. She would be gone. Marin stood in the ancient ruins of Aexis 4, sky glowing with strange auroras, and recorded her final message. It wasn't dramatic, no anthem, no speech, just a quiet smile and 5 words. Let them watch us live. The Void Core spears launched from Earth in a staggered sequence. Marin's pulse traveled with them, riding on a frequency only the first mind could generate. The Dominion's systems, precise, clinical, arrogant, never saw it coming. When the 3 cores aligned with the Sunbreaker's siphon ports, the sky turned inside out. Time bent, sound inverted, and the Sunbreaker cracked like an egg. The shockwave tore through the outer rings of Saturn, slicing the Zorith fleet in half. Their command ship split clean down the center, its onboard AI screaming in ancient code before disappearing into quantum vapor. And Marin Vale became a star. Not a metaphor, not a symbol. A literal light now burns in the dark, orbiting Earth's far side. An artificial star of void shard and memory, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat. They call it the fractured dawn. And the Zorith? They fled. Not just from Earth, from everywhere. Whole sectors of the galaxy lit up with rebellion. The silence that once coated space like dust was gone. The stars were noisy now, defiant, human. They never came back. Not the Zorith. Not their reclaimers. Not even their drones. After the destruction of the Sunbreaker, after the shattering of the mirror array, the Dominion vanished like cowards in the dark. Like they'd never been gods at all. For the first time in galactic memory, Earth stood alone and unafraid. But peace didn't come easily. The Shatterborn found themselves navigating a new kind of war, the rebuilding of a world broken not just by alien hands, but by silence, by fear, by the slow rot of forgotten courage. There were cities to unearth, children to awaken, minds to mend. There were the remembered, souls forever hovering between light and shadow, stored in crystalline vaults like ancient prophets waiting to speak again. And there was Marin Vale, or what was left of her. The fractured dawn orbited in perfect rhythm above Earth, casting no heat, only light. Soft, white, pulsing light. Scientists couldn't explain its makeup. Engineers couldn't map its energy. Priests wept in front of it. Survivors sang to it. And across the galaxy, rebels tuned into its signal like pilgrims reaching for something divine. Somewhere inside that star was still her. A voice, a memory, a scar carved so deep into time that not even the Dominion's best machines could erase it. Tariq Jinn, now old and half-blind, became the steward of her message. He published everything, her visions, her words, her decisions. He named the record The Cycle Shattered, and he refused to let anyone edit a single word. On the 1000th day after the Sunbreaker's fall, the first mind returned. One last time, not with whispers, not in riddles, but with a gift. A signal pulse hit Earth's old radar stations in waves, rhythmic, deliberate. Hidden inside it was a map, one that spanned across galaxies, a pathway of ruined worlds, ancient vaults, and forgotten resistance strongholds left behind by those the Dominion had silenced long ago. Humanity had survived. Now it would liberate. Ships were built, not warships, awakening ships, carriers of resonance towers, mind cores, and the voices of the remembered. These weren't armies. They were messengers, bearers of noise, truth, memory. And so began the Great Uprising. Not a war, but a reckoning. Humanity didn't conquer. They reminded. They returned to worlds the Dominion had burned and planted shards of the fractured dawn in their soil. They taught survivors how to speak again, how to remember. They played Marin's message on the winds of alien skies. We are not your children. We are your reckoning. On Axis 4, the ruins were rebuilt into a university, the Vale Institute of Resistance Memory. No statues, just echoes. Her name wasn't worshipped. It was remembered in every tongue by every species. She had become more than human. She had become proof that no matter how powerful the silence, one voice, unbroken, unbent, could shatter it. One planet, fragile and overlooked, could flip the entire script of the stars. And the galaxy watched. But no longer in silence, no longer in pity. Now they watched with awe, with respect, with a kind of ancient fear. Because Marin Vale had been just one woman. And that woman had taught humanity how to shout. And the universe? It would never forget that sound again.